Yeah. You know, that's not the sunnah. The Prophet rode a camel because that's what they had, camels and horses, and so the Prophet ﷺ rode, you know, the Prophet drank water. Is it sunnah to drink water because the Prophet drank water? No. It's not a religious virtue. So there are some things that are incidental. Certain types of food that the Prophet ﷺ ate, and certain mannerisms that were the practice of his people. But that is different from the things that have been taught to us as part of our deen. You know, this is very important, by the way. This is very important. And it is important for Muslims living in the West. Because one of the great challenges that we have, inevitably we are going to have, is to understand the difference between our culture and our religion. And most Muslims don't understand the difference between their culture and their religion. In UK, most Muslims who originate from the Indian subcontinent, mostly from Pakistan, they think Pakistani culture is Islam. They don't know really the difference. They think Pakistani culture is Islam. And similarly, Moroccans tend to think that Moroccan culture is Islam, and Somalis tend to think their Somali culture is Islam. People tend to imagine, because for Muslim peoples, Islam is so intertwined and so much a part of our everyday life, that we imagine, therefore, that the way that we lived our life back home, that was Islam. That's what most people, Muslims, they tend to imagine that. Right? Except those people who are a bit more educated and are a bit more versed, but certainly this is the case for, you know, people who have a more type of simple faith. And that really is not a problem, as long as you're living in Pakistan or Somalia or Egypt or Morocco. It's not a problem. Because one of the beautiful things about this religion, and one of the things that allows this religion to be able to be established in any land, in any time, and in any place, is that Allah has built into this deen a type of flexibility. Allah has built into this deen a type of flexibility. So it is not untrue, it's not an untrue observation to note that the flavor, I don't know how to describe it exactly, so I'm using sort of words, I hope you get, maybe they're not the appropriate ones. But the flavor of Islam in Malaysia is different from the flavor of Islam in Pakistan, which is different from the flavor of Islam in Afghanistan, which is different from the flavor of Islam in Morocco, which is different from the flavor of Islam in Saudi Arabia, right? You could definitely say that they have different characteristics, although it's all Islam, right? It's all Islam. But Islam has a flexibility. It has built within it an inbuilt flexibility to take on board a certain degree of cultural practices. Yeah? And that is why actually it's one of the rules of fiqh, the qawaid of fiqh, that in the absence of something clear from the Sharia, the custom, the urf of the people is something that is the deciding manner. So urf or custom actually influences the understanding of a particular issue in the Sharia. A good example of this that I can think of is the issue of travel. When are you a musafir? When are you a traveler? If you look through the books of fiqh, some say 43 miles, some say 3 miles, some say 84 miles, some say, you have all these different, where did all of these come from? Well, one possible explanation for that is that scholar at that time, when he was asked about what is a travel, in the custom of the people at that time, that was how travel was defined. in our culture, in that environment, it was considered to be you were a traveler after such and such time. But many scholars have said, no, you are a musafir when the custom of your people decides that that's a travel. So when in Canada are you considered to be a musafir? Right? What is it that you people consider to be that you're in the state of traveling? That is what decides when you are a musafir. Do you understand? So these things are going to change from time to time and place to place. Okay? So it has that type of adjustability. But there is a problem. On a wider scale, when you bring a culture, and generally by and large, if we analyze culture, at least in part, I wouldn't say totally, but at least in part, culture is very strongly a response to a particular environment. Culture tends to be a response to a particular environmental circumstance. So let us take a very evil culture that Islam totally condemned it, and that is the culture of female infanticide. The pagan Arabs, one of their practices was burying their baby daughters alive. Where did this come from? Where did this culture of female infanticide come from? When you look at it and you analyze it, you will find that this is a byproduct of the very harsh and difficult living conditions in which the Arabs were. And so due to those harsh living conditions and due to the constant intertribal warfare and the fact that daughters could be kidnapped and taken as slaves, and there was all this potential for dishonor and so on and so forth, and that women were considered to be a burden whereas men were fighters and they could do something useful. So therefore the female reached this very low status. She wasn't a priority. And from that it even became, well, if it's a choice of starvation or let's bury the children alive. So this culture develops from that particular harsh and difficult environmental circumstance. Now some of those cultural practices, of course, could be some things that are clearly haram and clearly condemned. And some of them could be things that are, that are neither condemned or encouraged. They are just things that are allowed. But I'm sure that each one of us could point out things that are widely practiced in our culture that we know are haram in Islam. Right? So let's take Lebanon, Palestine, honor killings. Is it allowed in Sharia for you to take the law into your own hands and kill your sister because she has a boyfriend? Is that allowed to do that? That's not honor killing, that's murder. Islam does not permit you to take the law into your own hands like that. How about female genital mutilation? Doesn't that go against what the Prophet ﷺ said concerning female circumcision? How about forced marriage? Is it permissible to have is forced marriage even valid in Islamic law? No, it's not. We will find these examples and many others. They are practiced amongst Muslims, even though these things are forbidden. Right? This is because people give their culture more importance than the deen. Or maybe they don't even know the difference between the two things. Now certain cultural practices are actually fine and they work very well. I'm going to get a little bit specific here because I think it's important. I'll get very specific and I'm sure some people are going to be upset. But anyway, who cares? I don't know, I'm only here for a few weeks and then